Bryan from UC Hastings College of Law. Thank you both for joining us. Bryan, let me start with you. Your first impressions here.
Very personable guy, wonderful family background, a mother a judge, father in the law. He has a long history, and he's young. He could serve for 30 years.
David, your first impressions?
Well, I thought it was a terrific performance. I've never seen little. And it didn't mention those. President Bush put him on the court. He worked for Ken Starr, and he wrote a tremendous amount of the report against President Clinton. None of those things were mentioned, but instead, Dad went to law school at night. He didn't mention that he was at one of the most elite prep schools in Washington. So he's trying to create the sort of, well, working class background, but really, he's much more elite than that.
David, you and I were talking as he was speaking. One of the things that he said was, you must interpret the Constitution as written. And when he said that, you said that's code.
That's code. The
code for what?
The code is to keep the Federalists happy. President Trump also has been using that line. The idea is that you will look at the text of the Constitution or look at the text of statutes and not go beyond that. That's the Scalia position. That's the Gorsuch position. It's very controversial to do that because there's a lot more that could go into that interpretation, but it has the effect of locking in things like, well, what does the 14th Amendment mean if it was passed at a time when women couldn't even vote? What does the Second Amendment mean? So it's a particular kind of judging that he was signaling with that. Now, on the other hand, he signaled in a lot of ways that he was going to be almost a Kennedy clone, perhaps. So if I were a conservative sitting there, a hardline Federalist, I might be a little bit nervous. We saw Attorney General Meese. I might think, did we pick the right one here?
Well, he has to swim more towards the center in order to try, as he can, to get a couple of Democrat senators to flip or hold every Republican in place. That's going to be a challenge. If you think back on his career a little bit, when he was nominated for the D.C. court, he was nominated in 2003. It was not confirmed until 2006. 3 years his nomination was held up. So he's used to the problems in Washington, D.C. around confirmation.
I want to ask you this before we talk about the confirmation showdown. President Trump said this is the most important decision any president can make. This is President Trump's second pick in 18 months after selecting Neil Gorsuch about 18 months ago. What is the significance of this pick, Brett Kavanaugh, potentially, if he is confirmed, to the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the land?
Sure. The significance is that he's a conservative. The court would be 5-4 conservative, very solidly conservative. You know, Kennedy could go kind of both ways sometimes on decisions. This nominee will be very conservative, and he'll be there for a lot of years. So it affects the court in a way that it hasn't been affected in many, many decades.
David, just very quickly, we're running out of time. Will he be nominated?
Well, he has been nominated.
I'm sorry.
Will he be confirmed? Oh, yes.
Okay.
No
I'll flat out say yes.
Before any
because
farther.
he's so strong here, and he has so many. The credentials going to be very hard for those red state Democrats to vote against him unless something blows up.
Let's go back and let our viewers hear. Just moments ago, President Trump from the White House made the announcement of his selection to the U.S. Supreme Court.
What matters is not a judge's political views, but whether they can set aside those views to do what the law and the Constitution require. I am pleased to say that I have found, without doubt, such a person. Tonight, it is my honor and privilege to announce that I will nominate Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court.
Okay, David, I want to ask you, as we get to that confirmation showdown, we know it's a very difficult process they have to go through. What will the Democrats do to try to block this confirmation?
Number one, what they're going to do is they're going to say he has a long record. Of the 4 potential nominees, Judge Kavanaugh has the longest record both legally and politically, because again, remember, he goes back to the Starr report. He goes back to Bush versus Gore, work that he did in the White House, as well as President Trump said, more than 300 opinions. So the number one defense is going to be, we need time to go through this record. Also, what I think is going to be very interesting is when Judge Kavanugh was Brett Kavanaugh's lawyer, he took a very expansive view of what was an impeachable offense when he was working for Ken Starr. And you know that the Democrats are going to spend a lot of time asking him about those views.
Very quickly, before we go here, we want to play a quick clip from Judge Kavanagh, what he said right after he was nominated by the president.
My judicial philosophy is straightforward. A judge must be independent and must interpret the law, not make the law. A judge must interpret statutes as written, and a judge must interpret the Constitution as written, informed by history and tradition and precedent.
All right, before we go, we want to get a final thought from you on the selection.
Game on. That's what you have to say here tonight. It is going to start in earnest tomorrow, and we'll see pretty quickly what the Democrats want to do on this and what the Republicans
You can't overstate
with.
the significance of this pick. Your final thought?
Absolutely not. This is the most significant pick, I would say, since Earl Warren died and President Nixon put Warren Burger on the court.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for your expertise tonight. Your time.